Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Maddie May and I'm so glad you're here. Today I'm filming a very exciting video. It's my first sit down book video that I have ever done, and that just excites me. I have definitely clung to reading this summer. For one, I was taking the MCAT and stuffing my brain with scientific information all day, so there wasn't anything I liked more than laying down at night and diving into a story and just not having to worry about anything but the story in front of me. So I really liked reading for that reason. And furthermore, my relationship ended this summer, and I feel like reading really just got me through that too, the breakup. For whatever reason, I really recommend getting into reading. I think that it's good for everyone to do. And just remember that if you can read, then you're a reader. Try not to get caught up in the fact that booktubers or book talkers are reading a book every day. When I was in college, I read one book every 4 or 5 months, and that is just as good. We're all in different phases of life, so I'm only reading this much because of the reasons I mentioned just now, and because I am out of school. I have more time. So, you know, your life ebbs and flows, and so read when you can and be proud of yourself for that. I think reading is a super special activity, and I hope that it's something that you guys can all come to find to enjoy. I don't know if that came out right. We'll go ahead and get started. I don't have all of the books here because I've actually given away or sold a few of them because I didn't really know I wanted to do this video until halfway through the summer. And so usually I'm known to get rid of my books pretty quickly after finishing them, but once I knew I wanted to do this video, I held on to them. So the first few books I don't have anymore, but after that I'll have the copies to hold up. This video won't have any spoilers. If I'm talking about something in a book, it's because it's obvious, not because it's a spoiler. So I just want to put that out there. I thought I would start this video by going over my absolute favorite and my least favorite. So my favorite book that I read this summer was Verity by Colleen Hoover. This book was so good. Basically, it follows this young author named Lowen, and she's only put out 1 or 2 books, and they weren't anything crazy. They weren't on the top chart. She's just kind of like a regular author. So she's trying to figure out how to pay her rent when all of a sudden she gets an offer to write and finish the books of a woman who is a big author and recently got into an accident. She's basically bedridden. She can't really speak or move. So this big author's husband hires Lowen to finish his wife's books for her. And so he basically says you can go into her office, read her notes, see how she would have wanted to end the books. And so she goes into her office and she finds something that is very interesting. And let me tell you, you know how some people say like, oh, just wait till the middle, or oh, it gets good towards the end. I feel like this book was 5 stars from the first page. I felt like it was so good the whole way through, and it was an absolute page turner. Undoubtedly 5 stars. I really have nothing bad to say. I will say this book has major trigger warning stuff in it, so make sure you look into that before picking it up. And I'm probably a little crazy for picking this as my favorite, but I really hope Colleen Hoover writes more thrillers because this book was literally so good. My least favorite, I have to be kind of careful with how I word things because this book is about sexual assault, and so I just think that it's hard to critique a book on such a fragile topic. So while I was on Goodreads, I actually saw a girl who had the same opinions as me, and she worded it way better than I ever could. So I'm gonna go ahead and read this. She says, "There are many thoughts running around in my head about this book, and it's hard to decide how to write a review without sounding completely insensitive. If this were a real-life account of a rape survivor, then things would be different. Every survivor has their own story to tell, each equally valid, and they don't owe anyone an interesting, convincing account of it. Fiction, though, is a little bit different." And I agree with that. This is a work of fiction, and so that makes it subject to critique. And I feel like there were just too many lazy attempts at portraying the girl's trauma. I don't know, I feel like I learned in my screenplay class in college, show, don't tell. So if your character was going to be a smoker, don't just say your character is smoking. Instead, show the character pulling out a cigarette and lighting it. And I just feel like this author could have done that a little bit more. I just feel like there was a lot of telling. There was just like really weird choices that she made. Like, for example, she started talking about this girl named Veronica out of nowhere. And I'm like, who is Veronica? Come to find out, it's her mom. She starts calling her mom Veronica out of nowhere. And I guess that's supposed to portray how she's like losing herself and how she doesn't really talk to her parents as mom or dad anymore. She calls them by their first names, which I totally get. That could happen for sure, but it was just so out of nowhere. I just feel like there were some choices that could have made more sense in this book. I liked it enough to recommend it to my little sister to read, but this was my least favorite book I read this summer. Now I'm gonna go in order on books I read from the beginning of summer till now. The first two I do not have copies of, but the first one is Beach Read by Emily Henry. She's the same author that writes this book, People We Meet on Vacation. Beach Read is about a girl and a boy. They are rival writers. They went to the same writing school together, and they're both very, very good at writing. Didn't really like each other, and they're both attractive, but she moves to this beach house that was her father's before he passed away, and he happens to be the neighbor. He doesn't think that writing romance is very hard. She is like, it's just as hard as the genre you write. And so they decide to switch genres for the summer. He writes in her genre, she writes in his genre, and that's the story. A lot of things go down, a lot of dates occur, and you'll have to see what happens if you want to read the book. But I thought it was really good. There were a few parts that I felt like could have been left out. Like there was this whole part about a cult that every time I got to that part in the book, I was just like, what is this here for? I don't really care. I also just didn't really think that they had that much chemistry, at least in comparison to the couple in her other book. There wasn't as many sparks in this book, and there was just random information that I feel like could have been left out. Yeah, I think I gave Beach Read 3 out of 5 stars, and I do recommend it. I read it by the pool, and it was chef's kiss perfect. So the next book I read, I had them in order, but then I messed up my order. The next book I read, I also don't have a copy of, but it was called The Last Thing He Told Me. And I would say this book is like in the middle of all the genres it was trying to be. It wasn't absolutely crazy like Verity, but it also wasn't boring. It was just so in the middle. But first, let me tell you what it's about. I'm trying to stay on topic here, but this is my first sit-down book video, so I'm just all over the place. It basically follows this woman and her husband, and her husband goes missing, but he leaves behind his daughter. And the wife knows that his daughter is everything to him, and so he would never leave her behind. So something fishy is going on. He didn't just leave. He must have been abducted. Something happened. And so the whole book is this mom and this daughter figuring out her husband's past and where he went, what's going on, and all of the situation. I think it was good. The other thing though is that it didn't really hold very many themes, and I also like to learn something from books, even if fictional. And I kind of finished that book and I was like, that was literally just a story. Like, I feel like I didn't learn anything. I know some of these critiques sound a little harsh, but I swear it gets better as time goes on. I feel like once I really started figuring out the things that I like to read, my opinions go up. So just keep watching, okay? Speaking of books that I really loved, the next one I read is Anxious People by Frederick Backman. I talked about this in one of my previous videos and mentioned that I really liked it, and this is a 5-star read for me. I thought it was so good. The thing about this book is that it's like so not about the plot. I originally picked it up because it's about a bank robbery and hostage situation, and I always think that's so interesting. It's almost like a character study. It reminds me of a Sally Rooney book in a weird way. It's about the conversations, the themes, the quotes, the character development. It's just a beautiful read. I cried, I laughed. There was a plot twist, and I love a good plot twist, so I thought this book was so good, and I really recommend it. It is in the world of literary fiction. It's not really a thriller, but it's also not really a mystery. So you just kind of have to read it to figure it out. But it basically follows this bank robber, and he ends up failing at robbing this bank. So he runs across the street into an apartment that is actually doing a showing. And so there's 8 potential buyers there that end up being 8 hostages. And the whole book is just conversations with these hostages. Let me know if you guys read this, but this was my first 5-star read for the summer. The next book I read was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This book is about Poppy and Alex, and it's sort of like friends to lovers, I would say. Poppy and Alex have been going on vacations together every summer for many years, and that's kind of how this book is split up. Each chapter is a different summer they spent together, and eventually something happened and you're kind of trying to figure out what happened. I loved this way more than Beach Read. I thought they had so much chemistry. I really related with Poppy and her relationship with her parents. I thought there were so many little baby themes and quotes throughout this book that stuck with me, and I just felt like this was a piece of art, even though it's a romance novel. So I really recommend picking this one up. Okay, next on our list, I read Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. And this was one of my only nonfiction books that I read this summer. Usually I like a good nonfiction read, but like I said, I was studying for the MCAT, and so I was just studying all day. I didn't really want to learn more at night, so I just kind of stayed away from any self-help or nonfiction books, but I'm really glad this is the one that I chose to read this summer. I so identified with this author. She actually worked in film till she was 28 and then went to med school, dropped out of med school, and then ended in clinical psychology, where this book kind of lands. It talks about her stories with her patients, her own personal story, and her like autobiography in a way, and it also shows her experience going to therapy as a therapist. It talks about personality disorders, different types of therapy, and I just cried and laughed, and I loved this book. I rated it 4 stars on Goodreads, but I almost want to rate it 5 because I still think about it. I dog-eared so many different parts that I want to go back and read, and I appreciate a good nonfiction book pulling me in and not making me bored, and this certainly did that for me. My foot is falling asleep. Gotta move around a bit. The next book that I read was The Song of Achilles, which I have a reading vlog on, so I'm not going to talk about this too much, but just know that I rated this 5 stars as well. I thought this book was one of the most beautiful things I have read in a long time. Like, you know how when someone says, oh, she's a beautiful writer, and you just don't really know what they mean? Well, you can point them to this book. Like, this is an example. I feel like this is also a perfect example of what soulmates are. I feel like a lot of books are about like a love story, but this is a story of soulmates, and if you've read this book, you know what I mean. The way that they speak to each other and the decisions they make for and about each other are just decisions that soulmates would make. This book was just beautiful, and I also loved that it was mythology, even if it was a modern adaptation of mythology. So go watch my reading vlog for more information, but chef's kiss to Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. She also has the same name as me, so she must be pretty cool. The next book I read was All Your Perfects by Colleen Hoover. A YouTuber I watched said that this book made her cry, and I kind of felt like crying, and so I picked this one up, and this is about a couple who basically fell in love, and 7 to 10 years go by, and now they are dealing with infertility and the inability to conceive a child. And so it's really sad. It goes from one chapter, the beginning of the relationship when they're falling in love, and then the next chapter is like 7 years later, and they basically can't even look at each other because they are infertile and dealing with that. And so I really commend Colleen Hoover for making a book, writing a book about such a fragile and important topic that I know a lot of women deal with, even if fictional. I thought it was just really intriguing and moving to read about. The reason I rated it 4 instead of 5 stars is because I feel like when I pick up a Colleen Hoover book, I am wanting a plot twist, and this book just didn't have that. This book was just moving, emotional, and good, but it didn't have a plot twist. There was nothing crazy that happened towards the end or even odd that happened towards the end. It was just a story about infertility, and that's that. For what it is, I really liked it. I just kind of felt like it was missing something for me as a reader. My back hurts now. The second to last book that I read this summer was Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed, and this book could literally have its own video. There are so many themes that Kylie wrote about, but not explicitly. She wrote about them through the stories of the characters. So this follows Amira, who is a young black woman living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know it starts with a P, I can't remember the city though, but She is a nanny for a white rich family, and the mom, Alex Chamberlain, kind of takes her under her wing and ends up kind of obsessing over Amira, like wanting to like give her free wine and just like invite her over for Thanksgiving. She just really wants Amira to feel comfortable and loved and whatever. To me, it just screamed performative activism, because Alex Chamberlain has her own company that is all about like women empowerment. So it kind of just felt like she was hiring this black nanny and making her feel at home so her brand would look good. Amira also ends up dating a white guy, and so she struggles with people taking her relationship seriously, because people are like, is he fetishizing you as a black woman? There's just so many themes in this book. I would say it deals with performative activism, white guilt, and fetishization of black women. And so the way it all starts is that Amira is grocery shopping with the little girl that she babysits, and someone basically accuses her of kidnapping this child, and someone gets it on video, and the rest is not history. The rest is in this book. My jaw dropped multiple times towards the end. So I'm really glad this book exists for people with malleable brains like my little sister to pick up and read and pick up on the themes in this book and how closely they mirror themes in our own society today. So I really liked this book, and I can't wait for Kylie to put out more for me to read. Okay, the last book that I actually don't have a copy of because I listened to the audiobook is Daisy Jones and the Six. I kept hearing that the audiobook was so good, and I had this car trip and I had listened to all of the podcasts for the week that I normally listen to, so I was like, I don't know what to listen to. So I was like, I guess I'll listen to this audiobook. And oh my gosh, this book was so good. Like, I loved Daisy Jones and the Six. Basically, it follows this girl named Daisy Jones, and she grew up in California. Her parents didn't really care about her, so she wound up in bars at a really young age, with men at a really young age, and into drugs at a really young age. But she had a passion for writing music and singing, and she was actually pretty good at it. So eventually, once she got old enough, she started a career in music. During her come up, she ends up collaborating with this band called The Six, and a lot of drama happens, especially with one of the band members, Billy Dunn. And the whole book is formatted in the form of an interview, so listening to the audiobook felt like listening to a really well done podcast episode. It was chef's kiss, so good. When I pulled into my driveway after like my 5-hour trip, I was like, I wish my trip was still going because I want to finish this book. Taylor Jenkins Reid has a talent in making the books she writes feel like real history. Like, I felt like Daisy Jones and the Six was a real band, and I know people have said the same thing about Evelyn Hugo, about her feeling like a real historical figure. I think Taylor Jenkins Reid is such a talented writer, and I really recommend Daisy Jones and the Six as well. All right, so that wraps up all of the books that I read this summer. I hope you guys liked this video. I know that I've been doing so many book videos, but if we're honest, that and studying is all I've been doing, so this is just the content I have to offer. I'm still going to be having my regular vlogs and stuff, but this is definitely a hobby that I'm so excited about and will continue to do. I have so many fall reads that I'm excited to talk about and read, so this hobby will continue, but just know my other content will as well. If you guys like this video, please comment below. Comments are my favorite part of YouTube, and it's why I do it, so let me know if you liked this, if you read any of these books, if you have different or the same opinions as me, and I'll talk to you guys very soon in my next video. Bye!